All right, so today we're going to learn about the pluperfect tense, both formation and its translation. And let's just dive right into it. So to begin with, let's just look at this awesome tense timeline, which I found on kentschools.net. Thought it would be a little bit more neat and organized if I used one of theirs rather than tried to make one of my own. If we look at this, it illustrates essentially where all the different tenses that we've learned thus far fall on a timeline, with the pluperfect, which we're learning today, being the farthest back in the past, and the future, which we learned, back in February, being the farthest into the future, and present being right there in the middle in the current time. There are some good little pieces to visuals of some things, other things we've talked about, like how the imperfect is an ongoing action in the past, as opposed to the perfect being a snapshot. That's why instead of the imperfect being one line like all the other tenses, it has an extended period of time. But the main thing that we're focused on here is how the pluperfect tense is the farthest back. If you see, it's going to describe, and we're going to use it to describe an action that happened in a time before either the perfect or the imperfect tense. So if we want to talk about an action that happened farther in the past than other past actions, we use the pluperfect. And in English, you might recognize this tense we construct it using the auxiliary verb had and the perfect passive participle. So an example would be I had called my mother, right? So when you arrived, I had already called my mother. And the action there, the implication is that the calling of the mother took place before you were arriving. All right, so that's where it gives you a sense of when we're going to use the pluperfect. Let's just look a little bit closer at that translation here, right? That auxiliary verb had plus the perfect passive participle, which in English we normally see with an ed. But there's also a lot like walked and ordered, but there's also a lot of irregulars like ran and fought. But here are a couple of different forms of the pluperfect with various verbs. 1 second. Now let's take a quick look at the forms. So we're going to form the pluperfect active tense very simply. It's nice. It's going to be one format that you're going to be able to reproduce for every single conjugation, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth, kind of like how the perfect tense formation worked. Except for it's even easier than that because we don't even have to learn new endings. We're going to go to that third principal part. We're going to drop the I to get our stem. Amav is our stem here, and we repeat it all 6 times. And then we just attach the imperfect endings of sum, which you've learned already. Eram, eraserat, eramus, erant. And once we attach that onto the third principal part, stem, we have our forms. Amaweram, I had loved. Amaweras, you had loved. Amawerat, he had loved. Amaweramus, we had loved. Amaweratus, y'all had loved. And amawerant, they had loved. All right, so no new forms. You just have to remember the formation rule. So I would suggest that you go and you just practice this with all the verbs. See if you can construct this with all the verbs in chapter 17 as a nice way also of studying your chapter 17 verbs. 2 birds, 1 stone. And then there will be a couple exercises too for you to work on in order to help really solidify this formation in your mind and the translation. I'll see you soon.